You're listening to a Rock Candy podcast.
You are now entering Magnified Studios. Welcome.
Coming to you from Magnified Studios, Magnified Pod presents Hard to Find a Podcast, covering your favorite indie bands from the 90s Christian alternative scene. Put your tape decks on record. I am Andrew.
I'm John.
This is our podcast, and we are a couple bros under the weather.
Yeah.
From the time we recorded this episode to the time that we came back to record this intro, and we have both gotten colds or something, so
it's the best. I was fully prepared to be like, well, I don't know why I sound like this compared to how I sounded in the interview, and then both of us are in that boat. So yeah
so hope everybody is staying healthy out there,
right.
Taking care of yourselves. This is a weird time of year.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't get sick very often, but this is that time of year when, I don't know, things start to, I don't know. It's probably also stress and other things wearing us down. And, but also there's all kinds of nasty shit going around out there. So
it's true. But what didn't stress us out was this great conversation.
Something else that's not nasty shit or something.
Yeah, that would have been another alternative transition. Our dude Jason Zeimet back on the pod.
Yeah,
talking that Joe Christmas. We're going north to the future.
Yes, and
it's an album that is very near and dear to him. He claims it is his favorite tooth and nail record of all time. So we knew we had to get into it.
Yes, to be sort of only tangentially aware of Mr. Joseph Christmas before the pod, and then to learn that one of our closest boys considers this album is like the top release. I'm like, it's a big deal. I mean, that's high praise considering all the tooth and nail stuff that we've covered in these last almost 5 years.
It's true. I put out the question on the socials about which Joe Christmas record people prefer, Upstairs Overlooking, which we covered last time, or North to the Future Tonight. And I think both of us kind of went into this one assuming Upstairs Overlooking would maybe be the default, right? I mean, that's what I kind of thought.
I would assume.
Yeah, and instead, almost everybody said North to the Future.
Interesting.
Or at least most people kind of say like North to the Future by a hair or whatever. So anyway, I know it's a beloved record for a lot of people. I had a lot of fun going through it. Perhaps there were some high highs and some low lows for some of us, but it was a great conversation nonetheless.
Yeah. So why don't we get to that conversation with Jason now?
Well, Andrew, we are pleased to welcome back once again shadow producer emerging from the shadows, Jason Zeimet. It's been a while since he's been on the pod. We were trying to remember exactly when it was. What did we talk about last season? It's all a blur.
I don't know.
Skate punk. You were on it for Slick Shoes and some other skate punk stuff, maybe? I don't know.
Did we have you on for
Goatee Hook, Sumo Surprise for sure.
Yeah,
might have been as far back as that. I don't know, but
we did an obscure Savior Machine and Rackets and Drapes episode.
We did. I think that was maybe before that. Anyway, it's a blur. It's been too long. That's the point. You're always with us in our hearts every week, but we're glad that you're actually with us via Zoom to talk about a record that we know means a lot to you. We were talking off mic a little bit about how we really wanted you and last week's guest, Andrew Gill, to be our Joe Christmas Sherpas, as Andrew said before, to guide us on the journey of learning more about this very particular chapter in the history of alternative Christian 90s bands. So, Jason, welcome back to Magnified Pod.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and can't wait to talk about this band, Joe Christmas, and their album North to the Future.
Yes.
And give some historical context to those tooth and nail fans out there, in addition to what Andrew already covered. He really paved a beautiful path to giving some historical context about this band, about what some of the listeners on this subject of indie rock and ska punk adjacent Christian music might find more historically interesting, especially as you are navigating very uncharted waters. I feel like this season of MagPod has been the deep South Pacific.
Yes.
Honestly, of what more normally would be an easily navigable New York to UK across the Atlantic edge of ska punk, Christian, hardcore adjacent type of stuff. And indie rock is just so left of center in this universe. And it also speaks to what I think Tooth and Nail was trying to do from its onset that people forget about historically, but then more importantly, now what they're doing today in 2023 as a label, how those things intersect more than we can possibly imagine or give homage to. So I want to talk about some of that stuff. As some of you may know, Unoriginal Vinyl works a lot with Tooth and Nail, but we work with a lot of other labels as well. And for those who have frequented your podcast, they know that I love all types of music, and it's not just one specific genre. I would call, I don't know, maybe unofficially Joe Christmas North to the Future my favorite Tooth and Nail release of all time.
High praise.
That's for a lot of reasons. That's for the reasons that help to define me and my identity. I think that when you call something your favorite album of all time, it's a far cry from calling something the best album of all time.
Right.
You know what I mean? You give a completely different context to the way things influenced or shaped your worldview when you talk about your favorite 5 albums or something like that. And I wouldn't even call Joe Christmas North to the Future in my top 5 or even my top 10 favorite albums of all time, which naturally would omit Tooth and Nail from being in my top 10 albums of all time. However, for Tooth and Nail, especially from the earliest days of formation, my goodness, it's just so unique. It's uniquely positioned and it has a unique voice. And it also speaks to a deeper dive sensibility when you're a teenager than just being a casual fan of MXPX or Supertones at youth group.
Right.
You become, by definition, somewhat of an outcast by liking this type of music at youth group. Yep. Just simply knowing it, let alone talking about how Scrabble Girl and the reprise of Scrabble Girl at the end of North to the Future are the perfect parentheses to an indie rock record.
I love it. Yes,
nobody understands what I just said. Maybe you two do. And
I was like, I didn't catch the reprise, so now I'm excited. To find that. All right. Well, what do I know?
So, I feel like we need to start where we start with every guest that we have on to talk about an album or a band. Jason, when did you first hear of Joe Christmas?
That would be the Tooth and Nail compilation volume 3. There were 3 different Tooth and Nail compilations that predated Songs from the Penalty Box. There was also 2 Artcore albums and 2, maybe 1 or 2, I think it was just 1, Helpless Among Friends. So Tooth and Nail, in the earliest days of trying to gather distributors in Nashville and in LA, would put together these comps, oftentimes of bands that they didn't even have signed to their label yet. I'm Your Biggest Fan is another one of those comps that fits adjacent to that. So it was signed and unsigned bands within the Christian music universe that they would go shop around via these comps, and somebody would have their ears perk up and say, hey, I'm kind of into this Joe Christmas thing. What is this? And I think that it was also Brandon's way of connecting to other indie labels around the country, maybe trying to find common ground and rising tide of indie Christian labels of the early 90s, raises all ships, Burnt Toast Vinyl, Blonde Vinyl, anybody like that.
Flying Tart, was that a thing yet?
Flying Tart for sure. Yeah, so Flying Tart had this band that they put out a couple records for. One was this was the Kindercore Kincaid split EP. This was on Kindercore Records out of Athens, right? And then there was the couple skate with I Love Rock and Roll and My Name Is Not John Travolta.
Uh-huh.
This was from like 1993 on Flying Tart. So the couple
Right.
skate, this is an earlier incantation of couple skate that didn't appear on Upstairs Overlooking. So, when you're putting together these comps, that's kind of how you find out about these random labels. And Flying Tart served, as Andrew called out last week, as sort of a weird upstream into Tooth and Nail.
Yeah.
And that upstream was not meaning that these bands were like signed to a bigger label. It just meant they had better distribution through Diamante than Flying Tart maybe had at the time.
Sure.
And so that's a lot of background to say. Tooth and Nail Volume 3.
Yeah. Was it couple skate on that?
No, it was I'll Bet
No?
You from this record.
Ah, fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. So it had an illustration of a monkey with eyes that were vertically oriented instead of horizontally oriented, wearing some sort of brain machine. And this was a demo CD that you could get from the Christian bookstore, either open or sealed for like $4.99. And it was just a gateway to listening to every band from this scene, sometimes part of Tooth and Nail, sometimes not. But when I heard, I'll Bet You Do in 96 on that CD comp, I think what it did for me was put context into the idea that Christian music didn't just have Green Day copycat MXPX or Real Big Fish copycat OC Supertones, but rather it had a Weezer copycat or a Pavement copycat or something that it's just basically like your way of listening to the True Tunes music chart.
Right. Yeah.
But in your own mind, if you know enough about music, you can infer the difference. You can say,
yeah,
Value Pack reminds me a whole hell of a lot of Epitaph and Fat Records bands. Okay.
Right.
I'll label it in there. So.
Yeah, we've talked about this a fair amount in the season, but as a kid who was trying to have a foot in both the sort of secular alternative and Christian alternative music worlds, like somehow a lot of this just completely eluded me, and not for lack of interest, just because I feel like the punkier mid to late 90s aspect of Tooth and Nail became so prominent, and that just broke through so much more than a lot of these bands did. So I think Joe Christmas for both of us was a band that we sort of knew about but didn't really know much about, and that's been true of a lot of the bands this season. So it was just a whole world that I don't think a ton of people were seeing.
When you're a like teenager or preteen, you listen to punk music and immediately are drawn to the energy, the catharsis, the release of hormones inherent to and the accessibility of being able to play your favorite band's songs on a power chord almost instantly, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But I was also in your boat where I was listening to Christian music plus a lot of indie rock from the radio and going to Tower Records or Blockbuster Music literally every day after school and just grabbing a stack this thick of CDs on the new releases chart and putting on the Nixons, Dishwalla, Primitive Radio Gods, the third or fourth Crash Test Dummies record, the third or fourth Gin Blossoms record, and starting to really define my tastes. And then people would see the stuff that I was grabbing and go, have you heard Pavement, Quicksand, Hum later on, stuff like that, and that gave me a broader sense of why should Tooth and Nail even bother with these lame indie rock bands with all this fuzziness and distortion? I don't even get it. But now I get it because it makes sense in the context of sounding a lot like, for me, and I think a lot of people, it just sounded like Pavement and Weezer together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think if you would have told me there was a Christian equivalent of Pavement, I would have been excited as like a 15-year-old, but I just didn't even really know that was like a thing. So I have exploring some of these corners now.
I have like a stack of records that made me immediately think about what I was listening to. So like I listened to Dinosaur Jr.
Yeah.
Where You Been? Because of the Spike Jonze music video for Feel the Pain, where they're running around
so good
in Manhattan.
Yep.
I heard Feel the Pain, and I was like, what else sounds like Dinosaur Jr.?
Yeah.
In the Christian music scene. So you discover bands like Starflyer, Joe Christmas, Morellis Forest, Fuzzy Stuff, Driver, of course, but Guided by Voices was another like extra fuzzy tone type of thing where Mag Erig came out. And I remember watching MXPX on 120 Minutes, staying up late, waiting for MXPX's like shining moment. They were on the Faith No More episode. Faith No More spent like 35 minutes on the episode with Matt Pinfield. And then after Faith No More came MXPX. And I remember the bridge moment on 120 Minutes where right before when Matt Pinfield said, up next, we got MXPX, some band from Seattle, a bunch of kids, high school kids, and we're going to debut their Chick Magnet video. And Bulldog Skin by Guided by Voices came on from this record. And I was so excited. But, all this junk that you were listening to, like this one, Marcy Playground, Sex and Candy, Neutral Milk Hotel, a lot of the Pavement, Sunvolt, even like Sparkle Horse, which nobody really remembers at all.
Yeah, and I remember.
All that stuff was deep in my playlist of CDs. And I never did the Columbia House thing, but I was always trying to go to a Blockbuster Video. And I found a guy at Sam Goody who was a punk rocker. And he's like,
Good, you got it.
I'm going to dime out every CD. I'm going to give you every CD I can for free, basically. Every one of the CDs I give you is going to cost 10 cents. I'm going to claim they're damaged, and I just want you to discover new music. So I listened to a podcast recently where Chris Carrabba was on it, and he was describing his music Sherpa at a record store. Some guy that he would go in, really ugly looking dude, gangly looking dude with a huge nose, would just be his music Sherpa, handing him CDs constantly. And that guy's name was Brian Warner, AKA Marilyn Manson.
Funny.
And he just give Chris Carrabba CDs all the time of stuff that he was listening to and saying, you should check this out, little kid. You should check this out, little kid.
I didn't know about that connection. That's interesting.
Yeah, I had the same experience in Boulder at Sam.
Yeah. Hey, Sam Goody, shout out.
Goody got it.
Goody got it. An important place for all of us.
So how does a dude like, I know you're just explaining how you're at the same time like expanding your musical horizons. What was it with this particular record? Because at the same time you're like playing in your band, opening for Goaty Hook and stuff. Like when you first heard this, like what sort of shift was happening in you? How did that inform what you were doing at the time with your music?
It was like when you listen to a record and you realize you can play a power chord, and you listen to Life in General by MXPX, and your drummer buddy realizes very quickly that like Uri plays no fills at all on Life in General. You have like now two people that can play punk rock music, and they can play fast punk rock music. But then you start to ask yourself like, okay, can I play the solo on Southbound at the end of Southbound in a clean channel? You know what I mean? And that clean channel starts to open up this idea that like, can I play a riff off of E major in the major pentatonic scale in a clean channel? What else could I learn that sounds a little bit harder? It's like stepping up your musical aptitude. So I listened to Scrabble Girl, which is the first track off of Joe Christmas, North the Future. And the riff that takes over basically the last 4 minutes of the song is the same riff over and over again, but it's just a variation of Southbound. Southbound
Interesting.
is in G, but North to the Future, they both kind of play off of the same easy major pentatonic. And when you're 13 or 14 years old, you're like, sweet, now I can solo. My brother was a shredder. Like he would learn Metallica in a night and all the solos, and he wanted to learn something harder like Dimebag Darrell immediately after learning a Kirk Hammett solo. And I was like, that's never going to be me.
Yeah.
But I want to learn the solo for Say It Ain't So by Weezer. And that seems accessible to me.
Yeah.
Maybe Sublime Santeria, a little too hard for me. But Joe Christmas, I like doing that. And so I would say that it was incorporating something at a slower pace, punk rock chords with an easy solo, slowed down tempo, and then I wanted to immediately speed it up into my punk band and do something similar. So there's like a song I wrote that was exactly the Scrabble Girl guitar solo for the back half of the song. I showed it to you guys earlier, but it's hilarious. It's just like, I'll blatantly knock that off for
Yeah.
this, how much I love this band and how much I love this record. And I knew that I wasn't going to do something like Haunted Mystery from this record, because it was like, no one's going to want to dance to that.
You should yes, call out the couple of things that you shared with us about how the various ways you claim to have ripped them off over the years.
Yeah, so there's Auditory, which is, I can now play something that sounds more like Weezer, which means I'll eventually get to being able to play Weezer, which will be really cool to all my friends in high school. But there's also the visual aesthetic. So there's this like Joe Christmas, North to the Future contains this scotch taped photo, presumably of someplace in Georgia, right? I've heard that this is an actual landmark interstate sign somewhere near Atlanta. Is that true? Did you guys do any research?
That sounds right. No, I don't know for sure.
But there's a very unclean aesthetic. There's like dirt, and there's like a wallpaper, and there's a pen that's just abstractly drawn on here with a couple of little Polaroids and a very small typeface up here. And it's funny, I got a contact sheet for this band called We Were Sharks a few years ago. They're from Toronto. And that contact sheet was basically asking me to copy, hang on, I'll see if I can actually find it right now, but the contact sheet was basically saying this band wants to put out a record. They've already recorded it, and they want it to look a lot like these albums that are very modern and contemporary. And the examples that they gave were basically Ventura by Anderson .Paak and Ariana Grande, Thank You Next. So they wanted these two aesthetics to fit into. If you're familiar with those records, are you guys familiar at all with those?
I mean,
the Ariana Grande one, but yes, but not the Anderson .Paak one. Though I'm
sure I've seen them, but I can't recall either.
So this is what they sent me, and they said they like this typeface for this can. They like this idea of having like a car graphic, a couple of different blurry car graphics, but they said we want something that kind of feels a lot like Ariana Grande here, maybe some Gaslight Anthem, some Royal Blood, some of this car cool stuff, basically. And they sent us that proposal, with which we took, and I saw that, and immediately like my brain started going to the aesthetic of Pink, which was a very in color of 2021, essentially. But we did like this packaging that called upon a lot of their ideas, mixing Ariana Grande, Ventura by Anderson .Paak, the pink color, the scotch tape. And then I really started to like deep dive into even more of the aesthetic, which was Joe Christmas, North to the Future. So I wanted it to look almost identical to North to the Future, and added a lot of layers into it, like an old 8-track. So I would handwrite on an 8-track and take a screenshot of that for the and an old key, and every one of these little like inserts that you had in here was really scribbly handwriting that I had written myself. All of this came from the aesthetic of just Joe Christmas. It was like taking something that I'd already really loved and had a severe amount of familiarity with, and trying to modernize it to make like, typeface written on the tape in different places with each of these records, or with each of these songs, and have the insert swap out, basically taking what I had always imagined in my mind. If Joe Christmas had more photos than just the North to the Future interstate photo on the front cover, if you could have swapped out the image, what would those nostalgic looking images kind of look like? That's a long way to describe how much this album has influenced graphic design and aesthetic that I have now.
Yeah, I love it.
That packaging, I mean, if We Were Sharks, I mean, I would be thrilled with what you put together for them.
Yeah, and they were like,
we're gonna have to share some of that on socials, just so people can see what you did, because it's beautiful stuff, man.
It's like how they asked the question, like, what gave you the inspiration to take it that far? because making essentially 14 different album covers is a pain in the neck, and handwriting everything. But I honestly had that inspiration of like, what would Joe Christmas have done? It's funny, like they made a lot of different stuff that I have in here, marketing material wise. They made like beer coasters of it and everything like
Cool.
that.
Oh wow.
I don't even know why I have that, but that exists. It all
That
comes
rules.
from just like immediately gravitating towards Joe Christmas. The idea, there's another book that I just am reading right now. It's actually fascinating. Let me get it real quick. This is also like a book that I'm reading right now called Dear Photograph by Taylor Jones. Are you familiar with this?
No.
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's a project that has existed since basically the pandemic, and it's an online website. You can submit one of your most precious childhood memories that you have. If you find a photo in your parents' basement and they give it to you, you go back to that exact location and you replicate it. So this book is filled with just tons and tons of like moments of filling like your head full of all of these cool memories that you have of like playing in the sink when you were a little baby. You got the photo of the sink from your parents' house. This is the actual parents' house now, but you hold the photo in exact juxtaposition with wherever that spot was that was significant to you, like 30, 40 years ago, potentially. And the whole book is just photos of that and somebody describing why they took that photo. So
That's cool.
I always like to say that I'm not a particularly nostalgic guy. I'm certainly sentimental about things, but I only am doing all of this stuff and talking about it now because I think it has a important context for 2023. I like talking about it in 2023 and how it makes sense to me now, not just like, oh, this is something that happened a long time ago, la-di-da, because my daughter doesn't care about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, not interested.
I think I mean one of the great values you bring to the pod is your ability to sort of provide some historical context for a lot of the stuff that we're getting into, and we appreciate you calling to mind that stuff that was happening back then and how it still influences you today. So one thing I wanted to ask was, so did North to the Future, did you come to that before Upstairs Overlooking?
Yes.
Yeah. So this was like the seminal Joe Christmas experience.
This is my Joe Christmas entry point.
Yeah.
I buy the CD right away when I hear I'll Bet You Do. And I like the little flourishes of the Moog in the chorus of I'll Bet You Do that remind me a shit ton of Brave Saint Saturn stuff, honestly.
Yes.
The Reese did later on. It's like you can hear direct links to that, the Rentals with Matt Sharp, the way that Matt wanted to incorporate a lot of that like padded keyboards into Pinkerton, especially. That kind of got ousted with Rivers by the end of that album cycle. I don't know, man. I definitely love North to the Future so much for a lot of reasons, but mainly because it's also really, really relatable to every nerdy kid out there. This dude does not in any way seem like Mike Herrera, or he's not zany like Five Iron Frenzy.
Right.
There's something a lot more identifiable and neutral about bands like this that make you feel like safe to occupy the same room as them for quite some time.
Yeah, you could like occupy a neutral milk hotel or something
maybe,
like that.
Some kind of hotel like that.
Floor or the 19th floor of Wayside School.
Also. Yeah, we talked about last week. I mean, this is definitely a more mature record than Upstairs Overlooking. So maybe there's like a little more, I don't know if I would use zany, but there's a little more adolescent vibe on the first record, whereas they seem to have kind of mellowed here.
Or something like that, I guess.
Yes, yeah. So when you went back and listened to the first record, what was your impression of that compared to North to the Future?
You know, it's interesting because this was brought up last week as well, but Joe Christmas splits after North to the Future pretty quickly and unceremoniously. They might play a couple tours. I wouldn't even call them tours. I'd say they were trying to get out to Cornerstone and back, kind of situations, or trying to get out to Seattle, play a few shows along the way and get back home. But Zachary, the singer of Joe Christmas, wanted to essentially experiment constantly with new sounds, noises, and he started a band after Joe Christmas called Summer Hymns, which I have mentioned
Yes.
is kind of a Joe Christmas 3 and 4 record. If you really understood or wanted to find out what happened to Joe Christmas, I would point people that direction. Whereas the other remaining fractured members of Joe Christmas went and started this band called World Against World that was signed to Screaming Giant Records. And that was a noise punk, hardcore, 121, Combat Junkies, Officer Negative adjacent hardcore
Okay.
band. So you could tell why they went two different directions. But I feel like Upstairs Overlooking starts off with this experimental noise, Elephant Six type of musical genre-less classification. And then North to the Future hones it in. Somebody like Brandon Ebel probably comes in as a producer and says, like, guys, can you make a song with actual structure to it?
Yeah.
And even then, I would argue that like the end of North to the Future with East Coast Angle and I Ruined It, they kind of go off the rails yet again.
Yeah.
Agreed.
They kind of lose focus on what it is to be a band that writes songs, which is kind of beautiful, honestly.
But I mean, there's something to be said about that.
Oh, totally.
For sure.
Totally. Yeah. And in Colorado, especially growing up around bands like Christine Front Drive and early Jimmy Eat World and those types of bands, you're like, some of these guys can really meander for quite some time in their songs. And seeing that stuff live, it became a whole vibe. In fact, as we go track by track, I'll even tell you about some of the feelings I have on some of these songs, that they're a whole vibe.
Cool. Oh, there are vibes to be had on this one, baby.
But I like that North to the Future kept things tidy. It kept things concise. And then Summer Hymns, these two records that I have here, number one, This Is Voice, Brother and Sister, comes out in 2000. So 4 years essentially after North to the Future. And then a celebratory arm gesture, which becomes like, at that point, those guys are truly off in outer space. At least Zach, so high that he cannot even hold a steady thought through a single song. It's bizarre. It's like zany, and he's like gone to the antique store and bought a Jack in the Box, and he's like winding it up and letting it pop on camera or on the microphone. It's just
I mean, both you and Andrew Gill have mentioned Summer Hymns, and I was not. Again, another band that I knew the name of but didn't really know, and listening to just a little bit of them, I need to do a much deeper dive. But it's like these sort of weirdo inclinations that Joe Christmas have, he fully gets to explore, and those hints of the sort of Elephant Six world you hear Joe Christmas, he fully gets into there.
These two records for sure are the number one influence. So on Avery Island and An Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel, just the idea of experimenting, and the idea, more importantly, of being a band that doesn't actually exist. They are a studio musician collective. They're not really meant to be a touring band in the sense that Tooth and Nail was looking for a band to be out there hustling their record. We don't know how some of these records were even made or paid for, like especially Neutral Milk Hotel stuff. It was just, how about we don't eat for 2 months and we live in a closet, and then we make this record, and we never tour on it, and pray to God that it becomes the most celebrated album of indie rock 90s that has ever come about.
And it worked out in that case.
Yeah, in their case, sure. But in a million other bands' cases, like Summer Hymns, you have as equally obscure experiments that just went wrong. I would argue Sparkle Horse's story especially was particularly tragic in that guy's desire to just constantly innovate, constantly experiment with new sights and sounds and everything like that. That record, Viva Dixieland, is all over the place. It's crazy.
When Neutral Milk Hotel reunited, I don't even remember how long that was now, maybe like close to 10 years ago, and I finally got to see him playing that Saw live. I was like, oh man, the weird warbly sounds I've heard in my head come to life with the dude playing a Saw on stage.
Andrew, did you follow any Neutral Milk Hotel ever at any point, or even now? Most people don't get it. 90% of people I know don't get it, or even more. 99% of people don't get it.
Airplane Over the Sea is the only album I'm familiar with.
Yeah. What do you think of it?
It's not, I mean, I understand its importance. I like some of the songs on it. It's not for me. Like it's like I don't seek out Neutral Milk Hotel or that kind of style of music. It's just it I appreciate the experimentation. I want people to push their art past where they where they feel comfortable and just keep creating something, but not all art needs to be for everybody.
That's true. Yes.
It's not for the reason Andy Dwyer gives on Parks and Rec, where he says they are weird and art
and sad and music should be fun.
Yeah.
Where's your favorite place to smush your boo? At the Neutral Milk
Hotel. Great episode.
Yep.
Yes, it's funny that you asked that, Jason, because I had a feeling about how Andrew would feel about the record we're discussing this week, and it was confirmed a little bit off pod before we began recording tonight. And yeah, this has been a season of me being like, hey, this cool like fuzzy world has been pretty sweet to hang out in, huh? And he's been like, I don't know, man, I can't get through this one.
Art doesn't have to.
Look, here's the thing. You were talking about the the New York to London, seasons.
Transcontinental easy voyage.
Yeah, like we've been in the fucking Mariana Trench in this season.
Yeah,
we're just like we are off course. We are deep down. we're
talking summer hymns for 15 minutes.
We got right. we're down there with the fish with like the little lights hanging off the front of its head.
Yeah, so let me guide everybody back to
at
least a little bit of a lighthouse. People forget the historical context of Tooth and Nail being a Christian label marketed and distributed by Diamante to Christian bookstores, but also making serious strides towards general market releases. So if people were to put it into modern day contextual pigeonholing, they might think that Unoriginal Vinyl is a Tooth and Nail solid state reissue label,
right,
some kind or brand. And nothing, in fact, could be further from the truth. I'm going to chase down the most interesting projects I can find, no matter what they are. If it's of any genre or any label or any classification type, it's something that if I'm liking what the project is bringing to the table to fans, and I want to bring those fans into the world of Portal hardcore black metal type stuff or Celtic Irish music for St. Patrick's Day, like, let's go, let's bring everybody along for the ride. And I think that Tooth and Nail was trying to do that to very little success in the earliest days of them as a label. You had very charismatic, very evangelical, obvious ploys to get better distribution in the Christian market because there was actual dollars being spent against alternative music for the first time in Christian music in the 90s. And they had Mike Knott singing about a girl on heroin in their second track, or Roadside Monument naming the first track on their record Sperm Ridden Burden, or Joe Christmas just being Joe Christmas and Driver 8 just being Driver 8. So I think that speaks more heroically to the true founding groundwork that Tooth and Nail had laid from the earliest days, as Brandon was a music fan. And he was trying to get out of the bubble of Southern California hardcore metal bands. He didn't want to be that label who just put out Christian hardcore focused records. He wanted to do any and everything he could to expand the reach of a band he liked. I think Joe Christmas represented just a band that he liked. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this kind of music you're listening to right now, it's almost like your whole season right now has reflected something that in a kid who's in the 90s would have seen a poster of at their youth group, or walked past a flat or a demo cassette inside of a Christian bookstore and gone like, oh, what's that? And then that would have been about as far as they took it, and then walked straight to the 90-pound wuss yellow cassette and gone, this looks like me. This looks like something I would dig or value pack. It looks like a Tide box, so I'm going to listen to that easily. But there's all these other little obscure what was that? And you guys are really trying to deconstruct like not only what was that then, but what is it now, or is it a thing? And you're
Yeah.
probably landing on different ends of the spectrum. Andrew's probably going like, it's not a thing. It never was a thing. That was the problem. And John's
Yeah.
like, come on, man, give it a try, man. It's cool. There's a moment here or there. And now you're looking at, I don't know, 48 hours of the cumulatively of the last season where you're like, that's a lot of time to spend on music I don't really love.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I don't know, Andrew, feel free to weigh in, but
Dude, did I just blind read y'all? Did I just
here's the thing, like the Pedro and the Bazan stuff was some of the most significant episodes that we've done in recent years, and the coverage of that was really important. And then there's been some really hit or miss stuff, and it's, some of it's because it's just not my vibe, and then some of it just doesn't land lyrically for me. And if something's not landing musically or lyrically for me, it's just like,
what's left?
yeah, what's left? And if I can't get down with the fuzz, where it's a slog.
Let me ask you this. Where
Yeah.
does Joe Christmas North of the Future land for you?
Do you want me to hurt your feelings?
Oh, of course not.
Slog territory.
This is my personal favorite Tooth and Nail release. It didn't have to be yours. I couldn't
I
care
know.
less.
The thing is, John and I have talked about this ad nauseum about wanting to, especially in this past year, like spend our time trying to put good energy and good vibes out into the world and talk about records that we actually are going to get psyched about discussing, which is part of the reason like we wanted to have people on to talk about these records, because they mean more to others than they do to us, and we didn't want to do the albums a disservice, because we feel like that would be not fair, because they are significant to other people. But for me, this is not an album that I listened to in my adolescence. Joe Christmas was not a band that had any significance to me. Upstairs Overlooking has some really high moments, no pun intended for those stoner boys, but like there's some really high highs and moments where I'm like, oh man, this fucking rules. This North of the Future record is a snooze for me. It's slow and meandering and noodly, and it doesn't reach any of the highs of Upstairs Overlooking for me, which I understand could be maybe more adolescent and goofy. But musically, it's more dynamic, and just kept my attention a little bit more than this one.
Yeah.
I have many feelings about this record, which I will share as we dive in. But I feel like, yes, as you're pulling us, as the lighthouse is shining its light at us, let's get into some of the details about North of the Future as a little context before we go track by track here. It was released June 23rd, 1996 on Tooth and Nail. Recorded with Bob Weston at Electrical Audio in Chicago, which is kind of a hallowed music recording studio, Steve Albini's famous studio. And by all accounts, they were really happy with the recording process and how it turned out. We talked last week about how with Upstairs Overlooking, they felt a little rushed. They had just gotten Philip in as the drummer at that point and felt a little loose. And this one, I think they were able to spend a little more time and attention on it and felt good with how it turned out. I wanted to shout this out. I mentioned this to you all off mic, but I was trying to do some research into their sort of relationship with Steve Albini and with Electrical Audio. And I've seen Russell's been in a few different podcasts sort of in recent months and has talked a little bit about that. But just yesterday, an episode of the podcast In Loving Recollection was released, in which they talk about the making of this album. And Zach and Russell from the band are on that episode talking about it. So I did not get a chance to listen to much of that before we recorded today, unfortunately, but folks should go check that out. I imagine they'll get into it a bit more there. But yeah, it's sort of a hallowed musical ground and an interesting sort of move for them. Going from Nashville and sort of Lost Dogs choir adjacent sound to Chicago and a Bob Weston sound. Kind of speaks to maybe where their heads were at a little, but musically same lineup as the first album. Zachary on vocals and guitar, and I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but I think he's doing the keys too throughout.
Okay.
And Russell on guitar, Ryan on bass, Philip on drums. Produced by the band this time, which is an interesting change. All songs credited to the band again here. Chris Colbert / Colbert, maybe, the technician again this time. And I mean, I'll give a little bit of my thoughts here, although I think objectively some of this is true also. Like, it sounds less shitty than Upstairs Overlooking.
Yeah.
But it still captures that loose, fuzzy vibe. It's not quite as like kind of off the rails we were saying as Upstairs Overlooking gets, but on the whole, I think it's better made in terms of production, certainly, and songwriting. Yeah. Like, I think I agree with you, Andrew, that like the vibe of Upstairs Overlooking is maybe one that I find a little bit more immediately interesting. Like, yeah. When I put this one on the first few listens, I was like, I appreciate it, but like, it's maybe not like doing as much for me as Upstairs Overlooking was. But there were real moments on the first record where I was kind of like, they've kind of lost me here. This is a little much. Whereas this song, like, I truly, really, really like every song. There's none that like lose me or that I don't find interesting. That said, if you find the vibe already sort of a slog, this is only that, but like slower and more sparse. So yeah. I could see why you would feel like, okay, the looseness, the jangliness is still there, but like this is like there's not a ton of the like distortion pedal stomp lead into the chorus this time around.
No. The sparseness is there, the single note sort of noodling is very prominent. Some early Pedro kind of vibes, kind of slow, shuffly drums, and soft spoken, soft sung kind of lyrics. But
my appreciation for the record is like growing as I've gotten older too.
Yeah.
Just like I think Fred Armisen talks about as a drummer, appreciating space as a drummer rather than the older he gets, the simplicity of just being able to occupy a tremendous amount of energy and tone in an atmosphere within a song by not overdoing it, not killing a lot of notes and measures with fancy playing and stuff like that. So part of what I like about this record and why it's probably my favorite record in the Tooth and Nail canon is there's never a time when I don't have this record on. Like, there's never a time where that record's annoying me that it's on.
Yeah.
Ever. And I think every other record that I would speak to, I could probably in the middle of it at some point, depending on my mood, just be like, I don't really want to hear this right now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Joe Christmas, if you put on Scrabble Girl and you're just doing basically anything, you're driving somewhere, you're concentrating on a graphic design project you're working on, you just can let that record ride and not be distracted by it, not let it interfere with you, not even need to necessarily, there's nothing to sing along to.
Right. It's a vibe. It's vibes, baby.
It's just vibes, but it's not vibes in like an orchestral, atmospheric, Unwed Sailor kind of vibes, kind of way, like there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
But there's just something very familiar to me, and I'll talk about this as we go track by track, but there's something very familiar to me about like the energy underneath this record is one of people who are sitting in a room together, figuring out the space of the room, figuring out the tone to their playing in unison and in harmony with one another. It's almost like happening in real time in front of you. And it's like being in that room with them, watching a band figuring it out and never ever getting there. I don't think this record is like a stellar A+ record musically at all. I just think it's one of those vibes that you can just sit comfortably in. It's not going to bother me. It's not going to be the record where I'm like, turn that track off.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Yeah. There's
a moment here or there in two songs, the second to last two songs, there's like a couple little notes where they hit something that's really sour, very aberrantly obnoxious, just to get in underneath your skin. But apart from that, like, I love this record to just always have on. It could just exist in my permanent memory as a thing that I'm always good with, always going to like it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good assessment of it. We listen to these records over and over again as we're preparing for an episode and taking notes and stuff. And this one I've had on a ton as I've just been doing work this week. And it always like, it goes down real easy. Like, it's a great thing to have on in the background. Now I can tell you that if I would have discovered this as a kid when it came out, my take probably would have been, I wish there were some faster, more punky songs this time around. And so I think you're right that it takes my older ears to appreciate the feeling of maturity on this record. And, we talked about the favorite versus best distinction earlier. If we're comparing these two records, I might say Upstairs Overlooking is my favorite of the two, but I think this is the best. Like, it's there on initial listens, I might have found some of it kind of boring, but I really think that I had to settle into what it was doing and let it wash over me. Yeah. And by the time I did that, I really started to appreciate what you're talking about, the space between things, the confidence of it, as much as I maybe would have, when I was younger, liked them to sort of return to that wild, frenzied sound. I really appreciate that they had the inclination and the chops to be like, what if we did something that was like, sparse to the degree that like you had to be paying attention to everything we were doing and have it all come out in a way that's like not offensive, like you're saying, Jason. Like, there's nothing where you're like, all right, that's enough. Like, really commit to it. And they still have that sort of improvised, jangly, pavement-ish sound that we were talking about, where like things aren't perfect and that's part of the vibe. But I do feel like there's a maturity in their musicianship here that's just not on the first record.
There's a Weezer style only energy to it, but then also for me, even as a 12-year-old kid, like, I think 96, I can think back specifically to thinking that the best track to come out of 1996 period for me, even though I loved going to punk shows and ska shows and hardcore shows, the best song that I liked was Primitive Radio Gods, standing outside a broken phone booth with money in my pocket.
Pretty hard to beat.
And that song took like, he's talked about that record and that song taking him all of 5 minutes. He just figured out a drum loop. He just
been downhearted, baby. Ever since the day we met. Yeah, it's so great.
And just took a loop of a BB King song and like put together nothing. And it filled this space for my consciousness of like, okay, I got to have something to listen to on the drive home from this MXPX concert. I got to just like hear music still, but it's not going to interfere with like processing through what my day has contained, from going to school this morning to seeing MXPX at night to getting punched in the face or my nose smashed in at a strung out show. Like, I got to have a space for all of that to sift through.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Are important to me. And Joe Christmas is just that. It's just Primitive Radio Gods in a nutshell.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely a chill out lane here. But I think, there are some interesting sort of mysterious, like, questioning melodies here that are like not what you expect. Maybe the chord progression goes in a way you're not imagining, and there's sort of some unresolved, like, I don't know. It does interesting things musically that I'm like, oh, I wasn't, if the verse is really slow, I'm kind of like, am I into this? And then the chorus is like, oh, that's what you're doing? Like, I feel like that that keeps happening on this record for me.
I'm okay that it doesn't go anywhere too. I'm just okay.
Yeah.
It
No.
might just stay the same. And
Yeah.
let's get into it. Let's dive in.
Let's get into it. I'm going to say a couple more things before we start, but everything is much clearer in the mix. We will hear that. That's evident. The drums sound much better this time, at least in terms of like the auditory quality. The vocals are not buried; they're very front and center in the mix. I love the addition of the Moogie keyboards that you're mentioning, Jason, on this record. Those really go a long way for me. The Weezery era of those keys. Once again, no explicitly Christian lyrics this time around. We'll touch on that as we go through these songs, but it includes one song from the earlier Oatmeal EP here as well, re-recorded this time, but you can tell which one that is. We'll get to that. And then just one more thing I wanted to mention from the liner notes, more sort of poking capitalist fun at tooth and nail, because they credit Brandon Ebel as executive producer / corporate funding. So that's funny. All right. Should we play some Scrabble?
Let's go play some Scrabble, boys.
Let's do it. Everybody grab your tiles.
Not even
No, it's not.
Driving and I'm dreaming. No place I'd rather.
You're right. It is a similar riff. We'll skip ahead later. This is my number 2. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's my number 2 as well.
Okay.
This is not in my top 3.
Fascinating. I guess
is interesting because I would say for this, I was with this guy Caleb in Tucson, Arizona last week. He's making a Squad 5-0 documentary. I never met Caleb in person, but he's really big into Enneagram stuff, and so he's a self-professed 9, and he says, Jason, we're just meeting in person for the first time, and I'll be honest with you, I don't have any 7s in my life. It's really interesting and refreshing to be spending time in person with a 7, and a strong 7, as much as you. And I said, well, you haven't really seen anything yet. Wait until we go for a walk around town. Okay. And I was like, he was showing me Tucson downtown, showing me this cool hotel that had 3 different concert venues. We went to all 3 different concert venues just for a minute, popped in, checked out the music. And I was just enthusiastically experiencing something exciting and new.
There's something rad about that, isn't there?
Something rad about it. There was a homeless guy playing a harmonica in this tunnel, and I walked up to him as we're walking past him, and I'm just like, hey man, what key is your harmonica? And he like points at it and he shows it, it's an F. And I'm like, oh man, that's the highest key an octave you can get in a harmonica or something like that. And he's like, here. And he hands me his harmonica like he wants me to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And Caleb looks at me like, don't you dare. I just start hitting it on my leg, start playing it right away. Just this dude's like, he's like, don't worry, man, I don't got nothing.
There's no COVID in there.
And then like we keep walking, and he's just like, man, that you couldn't have probably typified a seven's experience of life better than what you just did. You just walked into a completely new scenario like a psychopath with open eyes, ready to just experience something rad. And you're not even thinking about it afterwards. There's no post analysis. So I remember hearing Scrabble Girl and thinking to myself, like, yeah, that's my personality right there. That's me looking at my youth and my experience of the world and my world lens and thinking like every day is a pretty interesting opportunity to sort of experience something rad and new and exciting. And it could be a girl or it could not be a girl. I didn't even look at this song as like a romantic song. I just looked at it as like, shit, man, we're here on this earth and we get a pretty lucky break right now to even be alive.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love our dude's seven energy. You always bring it, and we enjoy it. And I love looking at this song as sort of like the expression of a seven type person experiencing the world. Right. The lyrics. I'm just gonna read them all because there's not very many. Simple, sweet lyrics. There's something rad about the exciting and the new. There's something rad about getting to know you. You don't need a reason. It's always in season. Stay out all night long, rocking to the same old song, staying out till night turns into dawn. And like, yeah, it's such a great kind of capturing,
like the Lord's Prayer for sevens.
Totally. grab a harmonica from questionable source, and it's like it. I know we said that the first record is a little more adolescent or whatever, but like this captures that young vibe so well, where it's like, yeah, we're staying out, we're rocking the same song, staying out tonight.
It's like really sentimental, and it's capturing that moment. My friend Garrett said of a video we shot one time when we were teenagers, acting like buffoons, just running around, acting like emo kids. He said, I could see and still look at that video and feel as if that moment was infinite. It felt infinite in that moment.
Yeah.
This is like the musical expression of that, the musical expression of infinite feelings as a kid, where you don't realize what's ahead of you, and you also feel in some strange intangible way like it's never going to end.
There's another song that he sort of gets at that with a little bit later that we'll get into, but I mean, this one, I guess I sort of thought of this as being like the most well-known song from this record, but I don't really know what I'm basing that on. I've just seen people talk about it. But it's interesting that you've mentioned I'll Bet You Do a few times, Jason, because we'll get to that next, and I have some thoughts on that one. But this song is 5.5 minutes long. Yes. And how it kicks off the album is this sort of, it's a chill vibe, fuzzy bass, warm guitar. The vocals are so much more on display here than last time around. They're sounding less warbly than the last record, but still his vulnerability, his imperfection is still highlighted. They didn't try to sand that off.
Singer, there's no strength or power to his voice,
but it's charming.
It is. It's very charming.
Yeah.
Just no power behind it.
No. It maybe some people might say it goes on a little too long, but
yeah, it absolutely does.
There's an extended guitar solo that maybe you could lap a minute out.
But again, you'll see this is the perfect parenthetical. The beginning of this album and the end of the album is just like a bunch of musicians who are getting together for the first time in a room, and they start jamming and they find their groove that they lock into, and they're going to harp on that riff longer than
for a long time,
longer than they ever need to. And you're just going to be witness to it, and you're going to sit there and you're going to go, you know what this makes me want to do right now is go pick up a guitar and go find like my people to play music with and find our little group to lock into.
Yeah. I think you just have to kind of give in and settle into the vibe of these extended jams on this record. And perhaps some of them could benefit from some editing occasionally, but you kind of got to give in. Now, a word we used a lot last time was satisfying, as in it's really satisfying when that distortion does come in. Which it does here, which we should hear some of. I think that happens at about 2:20, and it feels very satisfying to me when that happens. But it doesn't go quite as hard as the first record, but it's still a great moment. and that continues on for a long time. But I love it. I don't know. When we get to that moment, I'm just like, oh, I'm in. I don't know. That's how I feel.
Yeah, it's the moment you can just, if you really are along for the journey and you're kind of vibing with what they're vibing with,
Right.
that thing can go on for a long, long time.
Sure.
You're not
Yeah.
even thinking about it. Doesn't even matter. It's just like, now is the moment I can literally unplug from thinking about this music anymore and let her ride.
Yeah. Thoughts, Andrew?
I mean,
Say I hate it. It's okay. Just say I hate this.
I-
Why is it so long? You're
No,
like being nice around me about this. I don't know why. Stop it.
I think you would say if you hate it. I don't think you hate it.
I don't hate it. No, it's, I would say this is probably my 4 or 5 for the record. I yeah, a 5.5 minute opener is a choice. But I do think there could be some editing. I like where it eventually goes. It's just I think, like I was saying on the previous record, that there are some songs where it takes a while to get someplace, but once it gets there, you're like, oh shit, yeah, the payoff is worth it. And like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not in the emotional headspace these days to appreciate the record.
Tolerate complete bullshit like this. Yeah, I understand. No, here's the funny thing though, that you mentioned that. So there's 2 records here that I have by comparison, or I guess contrast, which were both Spike Jonze directed bands, and they were one-hit wonder bands. Really, I mean, there's Dinosaur Jr. and there's Wax. 13 Unlucky Numbers. One of the videos for Wax was a guy on fire, just walking.
Yeah, so good.
In slow motion. And then Dinosaur Jr. was a bunch of guys doing the golf carts around Manhattan. And those songs, both between the 2 of them, were probably each 2 minutes, 15 seconds long. Like, if you listen, can you open up Dinosaur Jr., Feel the Pain? Is that even possible, or is that too far-fetched for you to do that? Just Dinosaur Jr., Feel the Pain.
It opens with that great bottle cork popping off sound, and then that great riff.
So it says it's 4:19. That seems way too long. They must have had a radio.
An all-timer.
This is just Joe Christmas.
Yeah, very similar.
The opposite. They went out long. Yeah. It's basically like those 2 music videos I remember always wanting more, I guess is the point. I remember thinking to myself, like, why can't this song go on? It's so awesome.
Yeah.
And Joe Christmas just gave me that. They gave me empty calories that I was so desperately wanting.
I love that.
And from Wax.
Yeah. Everybody says Pavement, which is true, but the band I thought of immediately when I first heard these guys was Dinosaur Jr. for sure. So
yeah, absolutely.
They're both there. But let's get to this next song.
This is my number 1.
Me too.
It's
Jason?
my number 3.
Okay. Yeah, this is one. I mean, I was mentioning it before because I was like, well, Scrabble Girl's probably like the single, but I think I actually like I'll Bet You Do More. But
This
that's
was
kind of a weirder choice. But
this
now that
was
I'm hearing you say that this is the single, I'm like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense that we gravitate toward this one. It's so
in fact,
so
I
great.
feel like the rest of the record makes the bold and obnoxious choice most of the time to not go straight into the chorus from the first verse.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, this one
Whereas
is
this one is
more
just
radio
like,
friendly.
yeah, this was like, let's get to the chorus, boys. Let's just
Yeah,
do rockin', please,
yeah.
quickly.
No, we're at 3.5 minutes here, which is the ideal radio length, and is a good length for me, I think, for this
Yeah,
record.
Yeah, ideally you get to the chorus in terms of radio hits, getting there in the first like 30-40 seconds,
Uh-huh.
the song. But we're just over a minute and a half, just coming out of the chorus. But this to me has some of those interesting dynamics, and then got those
Mhm.
mogi little
Oof.
keys coming in, and then like his vocal dynamics too are hitting that falsetto. that
Mhm.
that to me is like, okay, we're doing something outside of just the norm of like the whispery sort of
Yeah.
um yeah, there's more to chew on in the song. And um yeah, I'm into it.
I've heard this more as like a vocal style in the early 2000s with emo bands like Copeland Beneath Medicine Tree. He did this a lot where
Mm.
he would just like flourish his voice. All American Rejects on the first All American Rejects
Yep.
record, they'd do this thing where they'd go, tears fall
Right.
down your face.
Yeah.
And this is what he does at that Zachary does at the end of this song, where he's just like hitting notes that don't even make sense with the key of the song, but
Yeah.
you're gonna go for
Yeah.
it. And we're not taking a second take of this because time is money, boys. Let's get through this.
Totally. I love it. I mean, like we said, it's charming. His
Yeah,
his his strained vocals are fun.
and there's a parallel for me seeing Astronaut in this time period, 1997. Astronaut being the Brave Saint Saturn predecessor, where
Mhm.
Reese is up there on stage with his Moog, just basically just turning knobs for the first time,
Yeah.
major choruses that he was writing and stuff like that. And you could hear there's some, hey, where'd you get that idea from? Oh, I was listening to North to the Future the other day. And so there's a
Yep. Oh man.
just for the
it's
chorus.
it's like it's like honey to me as a bee, that Mogi synth sound. As soon as I hear the ring come in, I'm like, oh baby, give it to me.
Yeah.
It's so great. It's like between that and the like, how am I supposed to know? Like, it's such a fun chorus. It's really
Yeah.
catchy. This is the one that I found myself singing around the house the most this week. Like the how are you supposed to know? But yeah, the combination of that plus those keys coming in, this one does have that satisfying distortion pedal stomp kind of dynamic change you're talking about, Andrew. So yeah, it all comes together in a really satisfying way here. Um, Curious, Jason, if you have thoughts on what this is about. It has a little bit of that, like, he's like, you want some of this? Yeah, I'll bet you do. Which is a little bit of the vibe we got with the first record of sort of being like,
I've never cared what it was about.
sure,
I've
yeah.
never even thought about it once
Interesting.
in my life. I was just like, yeah, that's a vibe.
It's
Especially
certainly a vibe.
if you look at the Tooth and Nail Records sampler volume 3, the first song on the record was Morella's Forest, Big Orange Bubble, which was a huge bummer to start off with. This clank down sound. And you're like,
Okay.
Jesus, what's going on? And then Joe Christmas, I'll Bet You Do comes in, and you're like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Finally. I
Yeah.
just wanted like a Diet Pepsi, and you finally gave it instead of all
Just
this.
wanted a Pepsi.
What is all
Just
this
one
stuff?
Pepsi. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean a lot of these songs are sort of variations on the kind of song we were talking about with the first record, where it's sort of like relationshipy songs, but they're sort of like, he's maybe like pining, or he's like, if you don't treat me better, like I'm gonna walk, that kind of thing. But it's also like, is it about that, or is it about like maybe even like a record label or something? I don't know. He's like,
This guy isn't the cool thing about this band, and especially this singer, the way he writes lyrics is he's not pretending in any way, shape, or form to be like a guy in the know about women
Right.
or a guy in the know about really anything in life. He's just like there for the hang.
Yeah. He says, how are you supposed to know when you're talking numbers? If you would only let it go, maybe you could lose your numbers. So I'm like, there's different variations under which there could be like some kind of like, why are you so focused on numbers? I don't know. I'd be curious to know if anybody has any grand theories, but
he's writing this song from the perspective, or maybe just his life experience has led him to the point where he's probably never given his phone number out to a woman in his life.
yeah. I was like, is it phone numbers or is it like some sort of, I don't know, like stop thinking about numbers so much, man? Like
I could just imagine a girl being like, hey, can I get your number? And he'd be like, when you're talking numbers.
yeah. That could be. I don't know.
How are you supposed to know? What I give her my home phone. My parents live there.
Yeah, there's just something like, I don't know if even this word has gotten canceled or if it means something that I don't know it means, but this is just dorky shit, man. Like,
I think dorky's still safe.
is it safe? Okay, good.
Yeah. Speaking of dorky,
Dreaming for gold.
My number 3.
This is my number 2.
Okay. Not in your top 3, Jason.
No, it's not. In fact, it's ironic because this was, in fact, the single. This is what they sent out to radio. This is the 7-inch that says "From the Upcoming, North to the Future."
Got it. Okay.
And it's funny to me that I'd mentioned earlier GBV, Guided by Voices, if you're familiar with that band at all.
Yeah.
Their big single in that year, 96, 97, was Bulldog Skin, and the chorus of Bulldog Skin and Dreaming for the Gold sound very similar. And it was kind of this nerdy, high-pitched singing mixed with dweeby guys, mixed with a song about like, I think the earwormy part of this song is not the chorus or any other part. The riff is kind of memorable, but I just love thinking about this song in terms of there was a lady who had a car. You're like, okay, that's a simple enough line that I'm always going to remember it until I die.
Yeah.
Good line, totally earwormy and hooky enough for me to go, okay, she's got a car. This lady's got a car.
I'm in. Yeah, it feels a little like one of those, again, like I'm warning you, like I'll leave if you don't love me better kind of songs. But like, again, this one feels like a little more like a short story and maybe the Econo molds. Like, so he says, if you think that you're the only one hurting me or hurting here, then maybe I'm not yours and you shouldn't be mine. There's some songs here that feel like, is it like a personal reflection or is it more of a sort of short story scene? And I think by establishing like there was a lady with the car, like it feels a little bit more like, oh, we're hearing a sort of tale now. But I don't know. I'm way into it. I love that. I mean, that opening hook is hard to beat. It's very catchy to me. I like that chord progression a lot. This is one for me where like the verses, I'm like, okay, it doesn't have the same sort of drive as that opening hook. But then where they go with the pre-chorus, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. There's like minor chords being introduced in the chorus, then too. It just takes some interesting turns. But one thing I would love to hear is like, so that guitar hook in the opening, and then again after the chorus, it comes back after the second chorus, but this time as a keyboard version. And ooh, baby, that Mogi synth version of it, it's so beautiful. It's at like 257, I want to say. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I'm just such a sucker for that. I love that melody. I love that Weezery feel there, like we've talked about. I don't know. This is a great one for me.
There's also something about this, and Jason, you're more of an expert in this area than I am, but like I was getting some like Polaris, Mark Mulcahy kind of like vibes going on here.
Yes, I have that coming up here. In fact, for a pretty girl, we'll talk
cool.
about Polaris at length.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But yeah, I mean, all this stuff is my vibe. All this stuff is my energy and my tone. And if I were to sit in my room by myself and put on a CD or whatever, this isn't for other people. This is the kind of thing that I just do for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love to have that sense of like, that's my musical taste at the end of the day. This isn't for anybody else, and nobody else will relate to this, and that's okay. I'm just showing up for me right where I'm at. So
here for it.
John's also here for Haunted Things.
It's true.
Either you'll give in or I'll give up.
Speak up, Zach.
It's a haunted mystery. Ever since the beginning, my time.
Oh yeah.
what a bright ride symbol. It's so bright, this whole album. The ride is just like tingy.
It's like washed out on the first record. Here you can really hear it.
Need my kidney. Will I be your donor? I think it's my delight. The joy of starting over.
Oh yeah.
Good note. Good note.
Yep. Yep.
And then go dark again. Yeah.
Andrew is asleep, and I'm like, this shit rules.
This is Andrew's right. And so whenever I had the CD player on repeat on my Sony Discman, it'd be on like a road trip, and I'd put on Joe Christmas because I knew the moment that Haunted Mystery came on, like that was a solid 20-minute nap setting myself up for. And then you wake up from the nap with the reprise at the end and be like, oh, I feel really good.
I'm refreshed.
What happened the last 20 minutes of my life? It doesn't even matter, because the moment he's just like eking through, like barely even, there's no effort being put into anything. Like I just picture this is the kind of guy who doesn't need ab muscles to be a singer.
Right. Yeah.
Diaphragm.
He's not singing from the diaphragm. Yeah.
It's just coming from a place in his throat, and he's tired, man.
It's funny because it's like, it's actually a relatively short song, but it's so slow that it feels longer. definitely sort of. I mean, I'm here for a good sparse vibe. I feel like we had some of these conversations around Starflyer, Andrew, where it's like
Yeah.
I like the sparseness, I like the slowness. Now, if I'm in that world for too long, am I a little bit like, okay, like yes, but I feel like it's sort of well paced out on this record. A little
How
early
did you
Pedro
guys-
here too.
When did you guys start this season?
April.
9 years
April, a year
ago.
ago. I remember you and I talking like a year ago, Andrew. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, bro, I'm just gonna warn you. There are gonna be some moments for you.
Yeah.
This is not gonna go the way you think it's gonna go. It's not gonna be engaging content with your audience. And you're like, no, but it's gonna be it's cool. Indie rock's cool. There's really good lyrical content, really thoughtful stuff to chew on. And I'm like, in my mind, in that conversation,
You're hearing Haunted Mystery in your head.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I was like, no, because one day will come. I don't know when that day is, but one day
We'll
you're
come
gonna hear
to
haunted mystery. And we're
uh,
gonna have to just be like, I mean, both of you guys yawned during that song. In a big
look,
way. Like
uh,
you're tired now.
it's
And I don't
late.
know
We're
how in
on
the world we're
song
gonna get,
4.
yeah.
Yeah.
How are we gonna get through the next? Like we got to go fast.
Yeah,
And
we might need to start blowing through some of these. But before we do that, I just want to call out nice warm electric piano here. This is the first of the songs where the keys take that sort of electric piano feel. Love that. Nice deep bass notes, just a hanging out for a while. And the second chorus adds in that additional like unresolved note we were talking about that makes it just feel more melodically interesting.
Yeah.
Poetry wise, I dig the sort of, again, Jason, I'm not sure exactly what he's saying, but I love the description of this haunted mystery keeps creeping all over me. So many surprises, too many disguises. My time, it's a haunted mystery. I'm not really sure what the mystery is. Is it just life? Is it a relationship? But again, I really like that description. I think it's really
It's
cool.
our shared Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I think that's what
Ah,
he's. That's
it
what he's
could be creeping all over you.
Maybe,
Um,
or maybe haunted mystery is another strain of weed. Who knows?
I think that's what it is.
He's
Weed plus the Holy Spirit. Can it be both?
he's he's smoking a fat doob and he's feeling like the high creeping all over
Creeping
him.
up, yeah. Yeah, you got any of that haunted mystery?
Oh man.
That's a great name.
Oh man, I just finished up my bowl of a Scrabble Girl. I need some haunted mystery.
Yeah, a little slippery chicken followed by a nice haunted mystery strain. That's just what you need.
And,
Yeah.
All right. Next song. Best wishes. Another slow jam.
This is a Pedro song if I've ever heard
Yeah,
it.
that really is a Pedro chord.
That this something could be on Havasu.
Yeah.
Trying too hard? Am I trying at all? I don't know. We had it all until you told me so. Why do you wonder so?
I'm into it. But
I'm
it
into
is, if your patience is wearing thin, this is not going to change your mind.
won't help you. I
Um,
do miss an era of music where guitar riffs or
Yes.
a line in a guitar was the thing to remember.
yeah.
Nothing about this band usually from Gold Zachary's lyrical or melodic compositional prowess is the thing to remember about Joe Christmas.
Right.
Maybe Couple Skate is the shining example to contrast that point. However, for most of this album, it's like that's a memorable riff. And
Right.
we don't have guitar music like that anymore at all. We don't have guitar music where you're just like, everything's like stoner rock where everything's really heavy and saturated and riffy and boomy sounding. But like, gosh, if you really listen to the brightness and the cheerfulness of the way that these drums are recorded, plus
Mhm.
the really clear tone on the guitar, you're like,
Yeah.
they don't make records like this anymore. They just don't. And they will again, because right now we're stuck in 1975, ripping off the 80s synth pop stuff. And that's cool, but that'll go away. And we'll get back to like Gin Blossoms and this type of music eventually again in like 2030, where there'll be
Hell
a
yeah.
really good guitar riff that leads the song across the water.
I think that's really well said. I mean, the first thing I have in my notes for this is another catchy opening riff. Like, I think what I love so much about a sort of 90s sound when I describe it is a specific electric guitar riff, and you build a song around that. And that's, yeah, well put, Jason. That I think that's kind of what I miss is like those were the songs that were on the radio. I sound like an old man now, but that era that we're talking about of
Yeah,
Dinosaur
you got
Jr.
a
and
Rickenbacker guitar,
yeah,
turn on the clean channel with a tiny bit of fuzz into it, and then you just like blang,
right,
blang, 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 blang.
right.
That's a
And that's
song.
your song. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's another short one that doesn't really feel like it. You gotta take a bath in that nice warm electric piano, those slidey guitar parts, the ring
Yep.
ring throughout, so great. This is, I mean, you're totally right, Andrew, that the opening chords are very pagery. This is another one though that by the time we get to the verses with the brrrring stuff, it feels very much like a Pavement song. Like I could hear Stephen Malkmus singing this, and it would just be like a perfect Pavement song. The chorus doesn't really come in until about 2 minutes, which we didn't get to, and it is satisfying to hear the keys and fuller instrumentation and some background vocals come in at that point. Um, so I don't know. I like when we get to that point. It does add a little bit of dynamic there, but um, we have something queued up here.
No, I'm just trying to think of which song.
Which one it is?
What is it off of Havasu?
I mean, Teenage Sequencer has the bring, yeah, those chords at the beginning. The first guitar chords, yes, are very reminiscent, right? Yeah, similar vibe, similar deal. I agree.
Yeah, the moral of the story here is that basically no bands would exist ever without Joe Christmas.
They're the beginning and the end, the haunted mystery
Yeah,
that binds us all.
why even try?
Yeah.
I do really like the lyrics here. They feel pretty resonant and poetic to me. Best Wishes as the name is, it's kind of ironic because it's sort of about a broken home life, maybe failed relationship, maybe more broad than that. Am I trying too hard? Am I trying at all? I don't know. We had it all until you told me so. Why do you wonder so where I hang and where I go? Don't diss my clothes. The picture's crooked, but so is the home. Don't expect me to be your miracle. I'm bound to fall. That part is repeated at the end. But I don't know. I'm like, is it a metaphor about like the picture, but also the person, where it's like, it's bound to fall because it's crooked? I don't know. It's interesting. Don't expect me to be your miracle. I'm bound to fall. I don't know. Thoughts? Andrew, you haven't shared much about this one.
I do like this song a little bit more than Haunted Mystery, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean that's a fairly good assessment of the lyrics.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm wondering, Jason, if you think like Joe Christmas, if people are coming to Joe Christmas for the lyrics, if people are coming for, or is this just
I am of the opinion that all of this type of music, nobody's showing up for the lyrics at all, ever. Like they might be character studies sometimes, but they're speaking in abstracts to the point where it's like little vignettes that are like dancing with each other that very quickly separate, even within the context of its own song. They like these ideas intersect and then they kind of weave, and then sometimes they'll go completely away from each other entirely. It's just like napkin thoughts.
Yeah.
they're a prompt band, and now they're a prom band. Yeah.
They're some literary dudes, which we learned on the first record. So perhaps there's some literary illusions we're missing throughout. But yeah, I don't know. I find this one like a satisfying
None of
narrative.
it means anything to me, and I'm just like, I'm here for the ride. The only song that means anything on this record at all to me is Scrabble Girl. And it's just because I identify so keenly with the sentiment of
Sure.
being, you know, enthusiastic about life to this bizarre level.
Yeah.
So.
Fair enough.
Just you know what they say, a pretty girl never lights her own cigarette. Oh, boy.
I knew that was coming. I knew it. Just gotta hold on.
Things that I want to say, but I don't want to scare you away. So many things that we could do if I wasn't so far from you. Then she looked him in the eye. She kissed him until he cried, broke his heart, and then he died.
I love those lyrics so much. Kissed him till he cried and broke his heart, and then he
He
died.
died. Yeah.
Might be my favorite lines on the record.
It's definitely, it feels like a little bit of a short story here.
Yeah.
Maybe more successfully than some of the songs we talked about, where it's like they feel more like just little sketches. But and this was still pretty vague, but it's like there's a first person in the verses, and then it switches to the second person, so it feels more like a narrator. So like I like that it's like, yeah, they're describing this guy, and it's like, yeah, then he died. I don't know. It's pretty
I
funny.
realized that like at this time was the moment I was discovering Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut, my favorite band ever. And it's all just that. It's just, this is just a band basically being Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Somewhat, you know, somewhat humanist, somewhat storytelling, somewhat sing-songy, somewhat obnoxious. And
Yep.
like they're just trying to sort of meander through a bunch of different types of personalities that I was sort of grafting onto as a middle schooler. Like these are all the kind of types of people that I kind of like dorky people. I kind of like soft and sweet people. I kind of like sentimental people. I kind of like hard rocking, but just for a minute kind of people, you know, like.
Yeah, that's well said. As we said last week, these are AP English dudes. So I think they're reading some Vonnegut. They're saying, so it goes, and throwing down on that. But I don't know. I like, the narrative structure of that. You know, he's talking about, I went along for the ride, but I'm stepping out.
Is this literally how many plays these songs have ever had on Spotify?
Seems to be fairly low on this record here.
We're hoping people listen to this podcast, right?
Yeah, let's get some more listens. I think the song rules. This one's just outside my top 3. I really love it. I think it's another one that. Go ahead.
I think this is the one that's got some Polaris vibes to me, some Adventures of Pete.
Ooh,
so,
yeah. Well, it gets to some interesting places later.
Yeah, She Is Staggering. It reminds me a lot of She Is Staggering by Polaris from Adventures of Pete and Pete, which is just amazing and a way better song than this band probably ever wrote. But still, it's just kind of like indicative of that college rocky vibey REM adjacent type of stuff that Miracle Legion, Polaris, and REM were all doing in the Georgia Eastern Seaboard. And that stuff didn't really fit in with my West Coast sensibility as a Colorado person who listened to punk and ska from the Bay Area or so it again separated itself uniquely within my musical Rolodex of stuff I was listening to.
Yeah, this it's another one that, like, I mean, Andrew was snoring at the beginning of it because it starts to like do It's just like, okay, here we go. It's another slow jam. But it's one that as it builds, you know, you might feel like it's a little boring, but that it really ends up being an earworm for me. Like it's a catchy melody if a slow one. And we do eventually get those dynamics that we
Yes.
talked about where it really shifts for the chorus, which is great melodically. We don't really get there. I think the chorus comes in at like 125 and then kind of builds at like 150, and then there's this huge ending. So I don't know, we could fast forward a bit and hear some of where the song is. Yeah. Oof. I love the like where the guitar goes. If you go to like 3:30, I think that's the big satisfying ending. Here it comes, baby. Build up. It's coming. So good.
Full release.
Full release. Yeah, very satisfying to me. Again, a little long, but that's kind of part of its charm. I don't know.
Yeah, this is probably in my top 5. I think
Yeah.
this and Scrabble Girl would be in the 4 and 5 spots.
Okay. Yeah. No, this is way up there. I really like the title. It is a very
It's a great
don't know.
title.
You could see that being the title of some book or something.
It's
Pretty
just
Girl
like
Never Lights Her Own
folklore
Cigarette.
stuff. For no-
Yes.
it doesn't fit in the visual aesthetic of this record at all. It doesn't fit in the musical sonic aesthetic of this record, but it's fucking cool.
It
I
is.
Googled it because I'm like, surely this is something that like Mae West
Some
said in the
double indemnity
1930s.
or
Yeah, something. But no, apparently not.
Sorry. Hey, a dame never lights her own cigarette. No.
I don't know if you heard, Joe, but a
I
pretty
don't
girl never lights her own cigarette.
You're gonna leave me standing here all day without a lit cigarette?
What's the gal's name from Double Indemnity? I can't think of it right now. It's escaped me. But
Jane Hanukkah?
no,
Is that
no.
Joe Christmas? That's my Joe Christmas joke. The
Jane
answer, Barbara Stenwick, of course.
Barbara Stanwyck. Yeah.
Yes,
I think
yes.
she would say that line.
She's a
Jane-
classy dame.
Jane Hanukkah.
That was a good joke, right? Come on.
This is a great joke.
Guys, cut and print. Podcast over. We just ended up. We're not going to beat that. It's downhill
we're,
from here. So what's even the point?
we're more than halfway through, guys. Let's keep
We're at
going.
the Jane Hanukkah podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Tea Green and Fady Mist. 2 strains for sure. Yeah, you got any of that Tea Green? I don't know, bro. I got some Fady Mist though.
I'm feeling pretty fady.
Pretty fady right now.
Song's pretty fady.
Easy step. She gets into my mind so sweet and innocent. Glancing over to see if you're with me. Slow breaths taken, leave no one alone. First day
Thoughts?
Fairly unremarkable song to me.
Definitely have the exact same thing in my notes on this song. Like totally forgettable.
I have a slightly nicer version of that, which is the verses don't grab my attention in a huge way. But I do like how the melody unfolds throughout the song. I feel like the chord progression that comes in after the first verse makes me appreciate the entirety of it entirety of it a little more. It does feel a little more interesting. It takes its time. This one never goes full ham. There's no release on this one.
If couple suite
Um,
is like the ultimate teen romantic notion of like seeing a pretty girl across the room and getting your like courage up and walking over to her and grabbing her hand saying, "Would you like to skate with me right now?" This is like the most awkward sixth grade dance saunter ever, where neither of you really want to be dancing with each other. You're like, oh, why am I dancing with this girl? Of all the girls I got asked to dance, shit.
yeah,
Going
and
kind of
and
back
then
and
you
forth,
like
in a sauntery kind of like da, 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 da.
and then you
Yeah.
like look down and you have a boner, and then everybody in your class is pointing and staring and laughing at you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You had a different
And then
experience than I did.
and then they call you khaki boner for the rest of your high school career.
What do they call you?
I don't know if they called you that, but
No,
somebody
they
got called Khaki Boner.
and this one was called khaki boner.
Khaki Boner.
Yeah, yeah. It's
That
a
was
great name.
what the song was almost called.
That's Jane Hanukkah's first EP, I think.
The working title.
We're
Yes.
Yeah. This is so debut album khaki boner.
That reminds me of the great band, the Broke Dans. Their album from this year is called Maximum Khaki, which rules. So interesting one here lyrically. I think again, definitely a relationship song. Maybe some like bitterness here, in keeping with some of their other songs along those lines. Like at first he describes her as sweet and innocent. And by the end he says, "You looked so cool and casual, so I try and look the same. But now I've got to love you. Tell me, who am I to blame?" But the chorus is, "I will not forget these days. I will not forget this time," which is sort of what I was alluding to before, Jason, with that other song, where it's sort of about like being in the moment, acknowledging like, "Hey, I'm in this moment and it feels good." So that seems positive. So I don't know fully what exactly is being said here
No,
about
it's just like I said, it's like a seven.
Sure.
It's a Sevens meandering napkin thoughts.
Yeah,
As he
yeah.
was driving to Chicago to record this record, he's
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, this is a cool line I just thought of right this second.
Yeah.
I won't forget.
Um,
I won't forget. Okay, yeah, I could work in a song. I don't know.
yeah. I'm curious now to go to listen to this podcast that I plugged earlier because maybe they'll blow our minds with all the very specific lyrical references they're making. But I'm here for the napkin theory. I think that's totally fair. Another literary illusion here: baby shoes
Yeah.
for
Is
sale,
this,
never worn.
I was gonna say, is this a reference to the world's shortest, saddest poem?
I think it's got to be.
It's me, trying to get closer, feeling like a jumping step is in my head. Can I be what you want me to be? You can walk away so far, I'll be there.
This rules, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say it reminds me of like this band and this style of music in the '90s. When this,
Chip and Daisy. Yeah.
remember, I got a girl.
Yeah.
Got a girl. She wears cool clothes.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
That
Yes.
kind of music of just like it's the same tone, it's probably the same key, it's kind of the same idea of like it all starts somewhere in this. Everyone was listening to Violent Femmes when they first
Yeah. Right.
kind of vibe, and there were a lot of bands that were kind of popping up at the local record store being given to me as a CD, as a dime out, that I just like was constantly digesting of all this stuff. So this all kind of made sense. I think the guitar is too bright in front of everything here.
Sure.
It's a little too obnoxious because he's not hitting a chord. He's hitting like a single note over and over again.
Well,
Distracting.
yes, this is the one that comes from the EP, and you can tell. And I think it's exactly what you're talking about. It feels like it sticks out here. This one is, faster and more driving in that one chord kind of vibe. I really like it.
Yeah.
I think I'm glad that they have it here. I'm glad that they re-recorded it, because I'm sure it sounds, better than the EP version. But yeah, it's certainly the only one that I would describe as being even like Nirvana adjacent in the way that a lot of their earlier stuff is, more obviously. If it was recorded shittier and his vocals were more strained, I think it would sound even more like that kind of Nirvana vibe that some of the early stuff did. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good call though, Tripping Daisy, Jason. And like last week we mentioned Early Flaming Lips. I mean, this is very like, she don't use jelly. Like another song built around a hook. The
Make
like
it breakfast. Make
Uh-huh.
it. Yeah.
That's
And
like
it's fine. It's the kind of thing that reminds me of like every battle of the bands you ever went to in high school. The winning band was.
yeah.
They wrote this song.
Well, it's a good song. I like the energy. It feels like it picks up the pace a little. And again, does some surprising things musically. Like it's been so propulsive and punky, and then it kind of slows down for what I think is the chorus when he's like, buckle me up, let's go for a ride.
Yeah.
And then there's a totally new, different sound for what I guess is the bridge at 3 minutes before it ends with the verse chords again. So yeah, here we go. Hell yeah. These background vocals come in. I love it.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good catchy thing. To
Yeah.
happen right there. That's
Turns
Pete,
it around.
It
That's
feels
just
kind of
REM, Pete and Pete.
totally. I can see Petunia dancing to this one.
I can see like Ellen and older Pete walking hand in hand through the football field.
Hell yeah.
He's
The
off in the,
beautiful.
like, bleachers acting like a dipshit, and there's a sunset happening, and it's great.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. It feels kind of triumphant there by that ending. And
Yeah.
the lyrics also feel kind of triumphant here. It's another sort of a "you're treating me badly" song, but
Yeah.
he ends it with "give to me what you've been hiding, or just hurt me. You can let me fall, and I'll get up for sure." It's the like "I'll get up for sure" ending that feels like a little bit of like a triumphant spin
Hopeful.
on the like.
Yeah, it's that 90s classic trope of like, I'm gonna sing about the most bummer thing you've ever heard and how broken my heart is, but I'm gonna do it just jangle poppy, all like I'm gonna be
That's right.
bopping our head while I'm telling you.
Okay, so we've gotten Andrew. Both of you have gotten only 2 out of your 3, right?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Here we go. Keep going.
East Coast Angle. Jesus Christ.
It's another kind of early Pedro riff right there.
Yep.
Be thou
My
fish.
What can you see in the daytime sky? What do you see in the sky at night? You've been taking cold showers every day of your life, looking for the
This is like proto brand new. This is like Soko Amaretto Live, like for like the indie scene.
Yeah.
It's another one that maybe doesn't do a ton for me, but is a nice vibe. I think it's pretty. There's that nice warm electric piano that comes in again.
It's a good melody, and I think it's probably because it reminds me of "And when I pass the bottle back
Sure. Yeah, that's
the overpass."
That's again another situation where the other band did it way better.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Way more memorably.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a classic sing along as opposed to this one being a little more vibes. But this one, I really like the sort of repeated distortion sound it closes with, which for me, from that point on into the last two, all kind of bleed together into this like closing instrumental, like let's have these repeated like drony distorted sounds. Yeah, that rules. I love this.
But there's like a part right at the end of that song that just like is going.
Yep. There we go. Yep. And then we're just kind of in repeated drony distortion sound for the remaining parts of the album here.
It's crazy.
That's very excited about those next two, and I'm excited that apparently one of the two of them, or both of them perhaps, are in you guys' top three, which I really like. But I'm going to say quickly, this East Coast Angle, somewhat cryptic lyrically. He says, "You've got to give up the halves and make room for the wholes. I can't afford to be mad at you because you're half of me," which is like kind of a romantic sentiment. And I'm like, okay, it could be like about a sort of, ending a relationship to take care of yourself, but it also could be like about a band. Like, is it like a band or artist relationship? Because he's talking about cranking up the amps in it too. I don't know. It feels like somebody sort of taking stock of like, hey, listen, we meant a lot to each other at a certain point, but I kind of have to prioritize myself. But like, you'll always be part of who I am, kind of thing. I don't know. I like whatever he's saying. More napkins.
I mean, it makes sense if you're using that, if that being your interpretation into "I ruined it."
Yes. Oh yeah, baby. More drony distortion.
This is my number 3.
And it's Jason's. Nope. Okay, your number 1 is still remaining. All right. Yeah, this song rules. Instrumental. We got Sydney Rents of Morelos Forest.
Hell yeah.
Throwing down some ethereal vocals. We love to hear it.
What's her deal?
Her deal is that
nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows. Her name's not even Sydney Rents. Get her on the pod.
Somebody told me recently that even the band has like tried to go drop off like peace offerings on her doorstep.
They don't know where she is.
Nobody, and like the last known address, they've dropped off stuff to her, and he refuses to even.
Wow. Fascinating.
Reply. That's great.
I think it's kind of awesome. It's like you love it, an artist to be like truly like.
I want her to be like mummified in the basement, a la Psycho. She's been there, just nobody's seen her or heard from her.
Sydney Rance has been dead for 30 years. I'm really into the vibe. I like that it made your top 3, Andrew. I like the sound. It takes a while. But again, I really like that melody where it goes for the chorus. This definitely has that quiet, loud, quiet dynamic here. Feels like a warm bath.
I identify with the lyrics.
I ruined it over and over.
Oh man, you and I have different things we identify with. Just characteristically different things.
What do you expect? You're a 7.
Yeah, I was gonna say when a 7 and a 4 come together over this album, this is
usually
where
you just make out, you don't speak. So that's the difference.
I ruined it.
That is true.
As far as I can tell, I mean, I called it an instrumental, but I ruined it are the only words, right? I mean, I think that's what they're saying over and over.
It is.
Except she's singing like I ruined it. And so
it's kind of like the Only in Dreams moment.
Yes. Only in Dreams. Man, great song. I really long ending on this one too. That kind of like
goodness.
You could have lopped some off of it, but again, you're just kind of along for the vibey ride. So I don't mind hanging out with wherever they go.
Vibe.
Yeah, it's a whole vibe.
Describe the whole album. It's just a whole vibe.
It's a whole vibe. It's like a pure distillation of the vibe on this one, where that ending just goes on and just like keep it going. Good stuff. But
this album and Radiohead, The Bends were my two put that CD on, and I'm gonna fall asleep in the midsection, but I'm gonna end on a really high note and get really jazzed to hear the closer.
Oh man, I love the band so much. Well, let's reprise this thing. Let's close it out.
Let's go back to Scrabble Girl Part 2.
Ugh, more drony, cool opening. I seriously totally missed that this was just Scrabble Girl again. Now I feel dumb.
But it's doing it with a mood. So
yeah, so it's automatically better.
1,000 times better.
Hell yeah.
I mean, I'm 13 years old. I'm in Seattle for the first time. My dad is getting his bone marrow transplant. We're trying to kill time in between going to the hospital, going down to Pikes Market, getting on the ferry, going to take a ferry across to Bremerton. Because I just imagined in my mind one day I'm going to be in Bremerton and I'm going to see Mike Herrera and he's just going to come up to me and give me a damn high five. And that's how my life go. And I'm going to manifest that shit. And the whole way across fucking the Puget Sound on that ferry, just on repeat, reprise from Joe Christmas. Look at the city, look at Mount Rainier, look at the sky, look at the harbor seals sitting on top of the little buoys in the Puget Sound. And that song's on repeat over and over again. Like, hey man, we're going to be all right. I had this song on a travel log I did a decade ago in front of a giant glacier in Alaska. Just sitting there looking up at that glacier, and it's like the soundtrack to my life, man. You can take this song and put it anywhere into any situation in my life. My wedding day, my child being born, it pretty much works unilaterally. Like there's no situation in your life where you're not going to be like stoked to hear at least this softly echoing somewhere in the background of your life, even sad days or bad days. It's like it's gonna be all right.
Yeah, man, that's really beautifully said. I really love.
Thanks, man.
That
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I can picture that. I mean, it's like a perfect sort of underlaying song. Like I pictured all the things that you were describing and hearing the song under them, and I was like, yeah, that works great. It's
and going from me saying I ruined it to Jason being like, here's this song that like defines my life.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's probably top 5 at least of favorite songs ever.
Wow.
My whole life.
All right, man. Well,
you put that to like end the record, and I'm like, I'm flipping that record over again. I'm gonna start Scrabble Girl all over.
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah,
They dovetail beautifully into each other.
yeah.
And you can listen to the whole album on a road trip, and like every 20 minutes you're going to take a really nice 20-minute nap, because the
Yeah.
midsection of this record it's how can something be like bloated and boring at the same time? Like, but it is. It's interesting. It's
Yeah.
sparseness. It doesn't grab me necessarily, but it's also just like there is a Vonnegut book where he starts off the whole entire book describing his writing process as basically napkin thoughts, and he piecemeals together things.
Yeah.
There's nothing surprising about that at all, and that's what this sort of like album comes to symbolize for me, with a very like, look at that album cover. It's just like, it just kind of hits all those sentimental nerves that you can have. It's just kind of like, yeah, man, north to the future. I'm an optimist. Let's keep going. Let's find some new adventures to seek out. Let's have some new whatever, north to the future. So, and the
I love
album
it.
isn't about that, but it's also not about that. So it can be really about whatever the hell it wants to be, because it's just scrabbled thoughts together. Scrambled.
Yeah. Scrabble girl thoughts.
Scrabble girl.
Yeah, it's a perfect ending to the album. I think your summation of it just now is a perfect ending to our discussion of it. So we are so grateful, man, to have you coming on and talking all this bullshit with us for so many years now. It's always such a great time, and you offer such personal, but also like I said, the historical, cultural context, as well as the personal reflections that show that they mean a lot to you. So we appreciate you, buddy.
I wouldn't do any of this restoration or vinyl nonsense if it didn't have like, it didn't fire on all these cylinders for me, and it didn't mean something still today. It was like, it's not just that all this stuff happened a long time ago to me. It's like, I'm gonna go do something rad. I'm gonna go run up the stairs at Red Rocks tomorrow, and I could listen to Reprise while I'm doing it, and it's gonna be awesome.
Totally. There's something rad in the new, what does he say? Yeah. Well, there's also something rad at Unoriginal Vinyl. Is there anything you'd like to plug as far as stuff you have brewing over there these days or coming up?
Oh my goodness gracious. There's a lot of projects that I'm working on right now, but one that I'm particularly interested in, I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm going to try to will it to happen. Do you guys know the Ann Arbor, Michigan band Bullpex? Bullpex?
I don't think so.
Wolfpack? Maybe.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Anyways, they put out a record at the advent of streaming services called, I don't even know what it's called anymore right now. I'm tired. But the album was Complete Silence, Sleepify.
Okay.
It was like 7 songs, and each one was 30 seconds long, and there was no audio at all. And they basically told their fans, like, we'll play a free tour if we can fund it. Tickets will be free, but we need $20,000. So the way that we'll make this happen, this tour happen, is if you guys stream this record round the clock, and you just hit play and go, and it's silence. So it was a way to like cheat the system right when streaming was invented.
Fascinating.
And they ended up making 20 grand to fund the tour and go all around. And they're an independent band, but they sold out Madison Square Garden, and
wow,
they have open source licensing of their brand and band package. So anybody like King Gizzard and if you know that band, those guys have open merchandising and licensing. So they'll let anybody print or press records of their music. They just don't care. And Volkpack is the same thing. So this album's called Sleepify, and I'm really interested in essentially pressing a blank record and having it, like the hype stickers say, like fully remastered for vinyl anniversary edition with the B-side lyrics etched onto the back, which is nothing. So like, just the worst of the worst. Like, if I can possibly please, as Unoriginal Vinyl, be in some way responsible for, like, I've gotten probably 50 texts in the last week from different people sharing the same dumb article about vinyl sales finally eclipsing CD sales in
Right.
America, in the world for the first time since 1987 or whatever. Like, I'd like to personally take ownership and stock and responsibility over reversing that trend and ruining the vinyl enthusiasts for life. Like, I want to bring about the vinyl apocalypse with a Amplify pressing of 500 units where there's no audio, but your needle will go onto a groove. It will circle the racetrack of the vinyl, but there'll be nothing on it at all.
I love it, man.
There's
I'm
a
here
band
for it.
called Nothing who's kind of done that, but they actually like recorded a room, but they just didn't play any instruments. They just recorded an ambient room. I want less music than that.
Yes. None more quiet.
So
None
you're
more
basically
sound.
buying an LP jacket with a funny hype sticker, an actual grooved etched vinyl, and then I want to have somebody write like a really academic essay. Like
Yeah.
It needs to
Harvard-
be. It needs to be
Harvard-
on like 200-gram vinyl too. Just
Yeah.
like just something so over the top.
yeah, just really obnoxious, like really obnoxious, and have somebody basically say that this is the most important album of all time. In the history of recorded music, there's never been recorded music more significant than this.
Jason, and even better yet, if that happens, you come on and we'll do a track by track.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be like, yo,
Spend 3 hours
You're
being like digesting.
Yeah, once you settle into the groove,
the problem is you're gonna just be like, Jason, this is more interesting than Joe Christmas. They're like literally the track listing is this. You can't, I don't know if you can see it, but it's just
it's like Z, 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 Z.
Everyone is like 2 Z's, 3 Z's, 4 Z's.
Amazing. So
Love that.
good. Well, Wolfpack, make this happen. Help Jason realize his vinyl dreams. But thank you, buddy. You've helped us realize our podcast dreams low these 5 years. So appreciate you. 5 years, buddy.
2018, bro.
Doesn't make any sense.
All right, that's fine. When we cut recording, then I'll show you guys the real good stuff that I'm really doing. Sorry.
All right, cool. Well, then let's wrap it up.
right.
Jason Zeimet, thank you. See you later.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Well, thank you again to Shadow producer Jason. Great conversation. Let us know what you think of this record, of any insights gained from Jason's thoughts, his thoughtful thoughts on the record, at Magnified Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Follow and subscribe to the pod if you haven't already, and give us a rating or review. We will read your Apple Podcast review on the show. I'm rusty, man. You can email us at magnifiedpod@gmail.com.
You can leave us a voicemail at 872-762-4763, 872-7MAGPOD.
You can support us at the Patreon at patreon.com/magnifiedpod, and you can pick up some season 4 merch at magnifiedpod.storeenvy.com. Well, thanks to Small Step Records for sponsoring us. Go to smallsteprecords.com to learn more. And thanks again to Shadow producer Jason and to Bruno at Unoriginal Vinyl for our artwork. Well, I think I hear the voice of the spirit begging us to shut the fuck up. We'll be back to make you go stray soon at some point. Not exactly sure when we'll discuss something great. Whatever it is, keep an eye out for it. See you soon. I ruined it. I ruined that outro.
The outro couldn't have been more ruined.
We bathe in that fuzz.
Yeah.
Come on, Sydney. Oh, yeah.
So good, man.
It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Makes me happy.
I'm kind of surprised it didn't make your top.
Yeah,
30.
there were a lot of contenders, surprisingly. But yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, so dirty and synthy and fuzzy. I feel like those are all words that you love.
Love them.
Man.
I hope people call me those things.
And for those of you sticking around till the end, we realized that we were like, hey, why don't you send us some voicemails and some emails, and then
We won't read them for months.
then we won't talk about them or listen to them or anything. Yeah, we will get back into
Yes.
a bit of a rhythm. We've been out of it for a while, and we're lots of stuff going on, and we'll get back into some sort of a rhythm here soon. We have not forgotten.
No.
But we appreciate your patience with us.
Yeah, we have received them. We are grateful for them. We will acknowledge them at some point, even if Christmas was like 4 months ago, and many of the emails and voicemails are about Christmas. But hey, Joe Christmas. It's Christmas time.
There we go.
Yeah, I just turned 40. I'm just about to go on a vacation, and then I go on a 3-month sabbatical. So it feels like a real month of transition and some nice time off ahead. So we'll figure some things out in that time.
Yeah, John is going to be toking on some Fady Mist and some slick chicken.
Yes, having listened to a little bit of the podcast we reference, for sure none of those are mistakes. Tea Green, Fady Mist seems to be straight up references to Smoking Weed. So
for sure,
well done, boys. Gonna get some of that haunted mystery. Get a little I don't know, I can't remember the other ones now, but anyway,
yeah,
good times. Spoken Weed with Joe Christmas. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
For more shows like this one, visit rockcandyrecordings.com.